When I came back home after 3 years, everything looked the same house, same laughter spilling through the walls, same smell of my mother's cooking drifting through the air. But something about it all felt practiced, like a performance that had been rehearsed too many times. My mother, Maya, smiled as she hugged me, her arms warm but trembling slightly, as if she was trying too hard to make it all feel normal. My father, Rizwan, wasn't home. He rarely was. Business trips, meetings, long hours, his absence had become a quiet member of the family that I told myself I had missed the calm, the simplicity, but underneath, there was a silence that didn't belong. My mother asked about my work, my apartment, the weather in the city. She listened the way she always did, with full attention, but her eyes drifted to her phone every few minutes. It wasn't the mother I remembered. She used to look at people when they spoke to her. Now she seemed to be waiting for something, or someone, to text back. That night, over dinner, I noticed how she laughed at small things I said, then quickly lost her smile. My sister Sarah was there too, talking about university, about her friends, trying to fill the air with anything but tension. The clinking of utensils became louder than the words. When Dad called, Mom's tone shifted, warm but distant. She said, "I miss you," but her voice didn't carry it. I looked at her then and felt something small and sharp twist inside me. The next morning, a man came by, David. He'd been around since I was a kid. One of Dad's closest friends, always at our family dinners, birthdays, holidays. The kind of man everyone trusted because he never gave anyone a reason not to. When he walked in, Mom's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen since I came home. It wasn't just happiness, it was something more careful, almost secret. I watched the way they spoke, quiet and familiar, words slipping between them like shared history. David stayed for coffee. They talked about the past, old friends, plans for some community project they both volunteered on. He made her laugh easily. I sat there pretending to check my phone, but I was listening. There was a rhythm in their conversation that didn't sound like friendship anymore. When David finally left, Mom stood at the window for a long time, watching him go. I asked her something casual, when Dad was coming back, and she said, "Soon." Her voice cracked on the word. The house was quieter after that. Mom cleaned more than usual, rearranged things that didn't need rearranging, cooked dishes none of us had asked for. Sarah joked about it, but even she sensed something was off. At night, I'd hear footsteps downstairs, soft movements, the faint sound of her phone buzzing in the kitchen. One evening, curiosity, or maybe instinct, pushed me to look. The kitchen lights were dim. Her phone wasn't on the counter, but there was another one, hidden under the drawer liner. I picked it up, hesitated, then unlocked it. The wallpaper was blank. The messages weren't. Short, quiet texts, all recent. Words like "miss you," "can't sleep," "tomorrow then." No names, just numbers. My stomach turned. I didn't need to see more. I put the phone back exactly as I found it, every breath feeling heavier than the last. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe it was someone from her work, or a friend going through something. But deep down, I already knew. The truth had a smell, a texture, an echo, and it was in every corner of that house. The following days blurred together. Mom was softer with me, as if trying to keep me close, but her eyes carried guilt. She made my favorite breakfast, asked too many questions, smiled too long. I answered in short sentences, unsure what she saw in my face. Did she know I'd found the phone? Did she know the silence between us was now full of unspoken things, One afternoon, I found Sarah sitting in the garden, quiet. She said Mom had been crying in her room earlier, and when she asked why, Mom said, "Just tired." I looked up at the window and saw the curtains move slightly. For the first time, I realized how lonely she must have been all those years, waiting for a husband who never really came home. But even that didn't make it right. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too still. Every sound felt like a confession. I walked to the kitchen again, drawn by something I didn't want to understand. The phone was gone this time. The space it left behind looked empty but dangerous. That's when I knew this wasn't just loneliness. It was a choice, one she'd made long before I came back. As I stood there in the half dark, I thought about how perfect everything used to seem: Sunday breakfasts, family photos, birthdays, and how none of it felt real anymore. Perfection was a mask, and my mother had worn it for so long, she almost fooled herself. I went back to my room and sat on the bed, staring at nothing. Something in that house had changed. It wasn't the walls, the pictures, or the smell of her cooking. It was the truth, quietly sitting between us, waiting to be seen. I didn't know it then, but that night was the beginning of everything falling apart. And the surprise my mother would give later, the one none of us saw coming, would break what little remained of the family I thought we were. I tried to pretend nothing had changed, but once you see something you're not meant to, you can't unsee it. Every small moment became proof. The way my mother reached for her phone the instant it buzzed, how she smiled to herself before locking the screen, how she walked to the balcony to answer calls that were about charity work. Even the air in the house felt heavy, thick with something unspoken. I told myself to stay out of it, that it wasn't my place, but every time I looked at her, I saw guilt wearing the mask of calm. David started showing up more often. Sometimes in the mornings when Dad was away, sometimes late afternoons when the sun stretched shadows across the living room. Mom always had a reason: he's helping me with the fundraiser, or he dropped by to check on something. Their explanations were casual, but their eyes betrayed them. I watched their silences more than their words. The pauses between their sentences were louder than anything they said. One evening, I caught a glimpse of them in the garden, talking too closely. Nothing inappropriate, but there was a softness between them that shouldn't have existed. When she saw me standing there, she froze for a split second, then smiled like nothing was wrong. It was in that moment I realized she knew I suspected something. And instead of denying it, she chose silence. That silence was her confession. For days, I walked around the house like a stranger. I didn't tell Sarah. She still believed in the version of Mom who could do no wrong. She didn't see the tension that pulsed under her words, or maybe she refused to. At dinner, when Mom laughed, Sarah joined in, but I couldn't. My laughter had died the day I found that phone. I looked at Mom and wondered how long she'd been living two lives, one for the family, one for herself. It was easy to hate her at first. But hate is never simple when it's mixed with love. I remembered all the years Dad was gone, how she sat up late waiting for his calls that never came, how she smiled through exhaustion, how she built a home alone. Maybe she reached a point where waiting wasn't enough anymore. Maybe she found in David what she'd been begging for in silence, a presence. Still, knowing why didn't make it right. It only made it harder to hate her. One night, I heard her on the phone again. Her voice was soft, breaking. "We can't keep doing this," she said. I stopped outside her door, my chest tightening. Then I heard his name, David. My suspicion wasn't a mistake. It was real. She wasn't talking to a friend or some distant acquaintance. It was him, my father's friend. The man who had sat across from us for years, laughing, sharing stories, trusted like family that I wanted to burst in, to confront her, to end it. But I couldn't, because the sound of her voice wasn't full of passion, it was full of sadness. It wasn't a love affair of thrill or excitement, it was one built out of loneliness and guilt. She said she wanted to stop, but there was pain in the way she said it, like she already knew she wouldn't. The next morning, she was quieter. She made breakfast, asked if I wanted tea, smiled with trembling lips. I could tell she hadn't slept. I wanted to ask her why, to look her in the eyes and tell her I knew. But the words stayed trapped in my throat. Maybe I was afraid of what she'd say, or maybe I already knew the answer and didn't want to hear it spoken out loud. That a few days later, Dad called. He said he'd be home next week, a rare thing. Mom froze when she heard, like someone who'd just been handed a verdict. She said, "That's wonderful," but her voice was distant, almost hollow. That night, I saw her sitting by the window, staring out into nothing. I wondered if she was thinking of how to end it, or if she was terrified of being caught. Sarah came to me the next day and said she'd noticed how cold Mom had become. "She's tired," I said, lying through my teeth. But I could see worry in her eyes. She didn't know half of it, and I envied her for that ignorance. There's a strange kind of peace in not knowing. Then came the night I can't forget. I woke up to the sound of muffled voices downstairs. I walked halfway down the stairs and stopped. David was there again, his voice low, urgent. "He'll be back soon. We can't keep meeting like this," he said. Mom's reply was broken. "I know, but I can't lose both of you." The words tore through me. Both of you. It meant she loved them both in different ways, one built from duty, one from need. That truth was harder to bear than any lie. When he left, she sat alone for a long time. I saw her through the reflection of the glass, tears rolling silently down her face. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't move. I wasn't her son in that moment. I was her witness, her judge, and her secret keeper all at once. After that night, I stopped searching for evidence. I didn't need any. The truth was already eating away at the walls of our home. I spoke less. She tried harder to keep the routine alive, as if pretending could save what was left. But every good morning, every "how was your day?" felt like small lies stacked on top of one big one. That I realized then that betrayal doesn't always come crashing through the door. Sometimes, it sits quietly at the dinner table, smiling, pouring tea, and asking how you've been. Sometimes, it looks exactly like love, until you look too closely. That I didn't tell anyone what I knew. Not Sarah, not Dad. I carried it like a wound that couldn't heal, invisible but bleeding all the time. I told myself I'd leave again soon, that distance would help me forget. But I knew I wouldn't. Because once the truth lives inside a home, it doesn't leave. It stays in the air, in the walls, in the pauses between words. That was the week I stopped believing in the kind of love that lasts forever. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew something was coming. The way the house felt, too quiet, too careful, meant only one thing: a storm was on its way. The morning my father returned, the house looked spotless, as if my mother believed cleaning could erase the truth. She woke up early, made breakfast, lit candles, and laid out his favorite dishes. Sarah thought Mom was excited, but I saw what it really was: a fear disguised as effort. Every movement she made was rehearsed, every smile too sharp around the edges. I stayed quiet, watching her hold herself together like someone trying to stop glass from breaking in her hands. Dad arrived just after noon, suitcase in hand, smiling wide like a man proud of what he'd built. He hugged Mom, kissed her forehead, told her he missed her. She nodded, barely meeting his eyes. I wanted to look away but couldn't. I wondered if he could feel it too, the strange tension in the air, the way her body stiffened under his touch. But he didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. Later, she told us there would be a small dinner that evening. Just us, she said, but her eyes flickered in a way that made my stomach tighten. She wanted peace, not celebration. She wanted one last normal night before everything fell apart. Sarah was excited, helping set the table, laughing, talking. I couldn't join her. The weight of what I knew pressed heavier with every passing hour. The evening started quietly. My father talked about his trip, about the deals he closed, about the future. He was the same man he always was, confident, distant, proud. Mom listened, nodding, occasionally smiling, but her hands trembled as she poured water. I kept my eyes on her, waiting for the smallest mistake, something that would finally break the fragile balance holding our family together. Then the doorbell rang. I didn't need to see who it was. I already knew. David's voice filled the hallway, too familiar, too casual. My father looked surprised, then pleased. "You should have told me he was coming," he said. My mother's lips parted, but no words came out. Sarah, oblivious, ran to greet him. David walked in, carrying a small box wrapped in silver paper. "Just thought I'd drop this off," he said, avoiding Mom's eyes. I could feel the air tighten that we sat down to eat. No one spoke much. My father and David exchanged small talk, but every sentence hung awkwardly in the room. My mother barely touched her food. Her hands were cold, her breathing uneven. I could see panic rising behind her calm face. Then it happened. Her phone lit up on the table. One message. Just a few words, but enough to end everything. "Still thinking about last night." No one moved at first. The sound of the ticking clock filled the silence. My father's hand froze midair. My mother's face drained of color. Sarah looked confused, glancing from one to the other. I didn't move. I just watched. My father picked up the phone slowly, read the message again, then turned to her. "What's this?" His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Mom tried to speak but couldn't. The silence was louder than any shouting could have been. David's face went pale. He stood up, stammering something about leaving, but Dad's voice stopped him cold. "Sit." That single word carried more anger than any scream. Mom finally whispered, "I'm sorry." It was so quiet it barely sounded like a word. Sarah began to cry. Dad didn't. He just stared at her, his expression hollow. "How long?" he asked. No answer. He asked again. Finally, she said, "Years." That word cut through the room like a blade. The kind of word that leaves nothing standing afterward. David tried to explain, to take blame, but Dad didn't even look at him. He stood, walked out of the dining room, and didn't look back. The front door closed with a sound that felt final. My mother collapsed into her chair, shaking, crying silently. Sarah ran upstairs, sobbing. I sat still, unable to move. I should have felt anger, maybe relief, but all I felt was emptiness. Later that night, I found her sitting on the floor by the window, staring into the dark. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She just said, I never wanted to hurt anyone. Her voice was barely there, trembling under the weight of her own choices. I wanted to tell her I understood, but I couldn't lie. Understanding wasn't forgiveness. It was just another kind of pain. The next morning, Dad was gone. He'd taken a suitcase, his watch, and a single family photo from the hallway shelf. Sarah wouldn't speak to Mom. The house felt smaller, quieter, like it was ashamed of itself. Every sound echoed. Every room carried the memory of that dinner weeks past, but nothing healed. Mom stopped wearing her wedding ring. David disappeared completely. Sarah moved out soon after, saying she needed space. I stayed, not out of choice but habit, like a ghost haunting the ruins of something once familiar. My mother tried to talk sometimes, but the words always died halfway through. There was nothing left to fix. One evening, months later, I asked her why she did it. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and said, because I was invisible. And he saw me. For the first time, I realized her betrayal wasn't born from love, it was born from being forgotten. But that didn't make it easier to forgive. Some truths come too late to save anything. Now, when I think of home, I don't think of the laughter or the warmth. I think of that message lighting up the table, the moment time stopped, and everything we were burned quietly to ash. My father never came back. My mother lives alone now, surrounded by memories she can't escape. Sarah still avoids talking about it. For me, I stopped believing that families break suddenly. They crack slowly, through years of silence, absence, and things left unsaid, until one day a single truth finally finishes what time started. That dinner wasn't the end. It was just the moment the lies ran out of places to hide. The surprise my mother gave wasn't wrapped in a box or hidden behind a smile. It was the truth, raw, unforgiving, and permanent. And once it entered our home, nothing, not even love, survived it.